Some people are born to lead, Dad said into the microphone, smiling wide enough for the cameras, and some are just good at pretending. The room cracked with laughter, sharp, brittle, echoing off the marble pillars of the Whitaker Foundation's grand ballroom. I stood 2 tables away, frozen, a champagne flute trembling slightly between my fingers. He wasn't looking at Cole. The lights above the stage turned my father's silver hair into a polished halo. To the crowd, he was charming, clever, untouchable. But for one heartbeat, Richard, and then it was, I didn't move. Couldn't move. The laughter felt louder. My heart hammered against behind me, I felt a hand touch my elbow. A gentle squeeze. Judge Eleanor Monroe, her face was carved in tight. The crowd shifted back. She's always been a bit much, hasn't she? Poor girl. Must be so awkward for her now. Cole's the future, anyway. I set my glass down slowly, carefully, like the smallest wrong move might shatter everything. Was this why he had invited me tonight? To make a performance of my humiliation? To finish what he had started months ago, erasing me from his world, piece by piece? I turned toward the towering glass windows, my reflection a pale blur against the city skyline. Once, years ago, standing in this same ballroom, I had told my father that someday I wanted to build something real, something that mattered. He had placed his hand on my shoulder then, squeezed it, and said, "You will, Lauren. You already are." The same hand that lifted me up now shoved me down, without blinking. The mayor's voice boomed over the speakers, calling for the next portion of the evening. I didn't hear him. I didn't hear anything. Just the faint rush of blood in my ears, the brittle laughter still ringing, the crack of something unseen, but irreversible, in the foundation of everything I thought we shared. And, somewhere, beneath the noise, a single, burning question. Why tonight? Why me? Why now? I didn't leave right away. Some stubborn, aching part of me needed to see it for myself. The Whitaker Foundation exhibit, a glossy installation tucked just off the main ballroom, celebrated the pillars of our success. Scholarships, outreach programs, humanitarian awards. For years, I'd walked past the same centerpiece display, a photo of my father and me at my first fundraising gala, my face flushed with pride, his hand resting proudly on my shoulder. Tonight, the space was different. My father's photo remained, larger than life under the glass. But where there had once been 2 figures, smiling together, now there was only one. They had cropped me out. So cleanly, so perfectly, you wouldn't know I had ever been there at all. Next to the photo, a new placard gleamed under the spotlight. The II, Future of Philanthropy, Cole Whitaker. A smaller easel leaned against the wall, half hidden behind a cluster of tall lilies. It held my old Young Philanthropist award, cracked across the corner. The frame bowed as if someone had stepped on it and forgotten to fix it. I stared at it for a long time, feeling nothing at first. Just a kind of hollow buzzing under my ribs, like the sound of wind slipping through broken glass. Behind me, the murmur of the gala continued. Music, clinking glasses, polite laughter. A world spinning on without me. I turned to leave, my heels clicking softly on the polished marble. That's when I felt someone fall into step beside me. It was Evan, my cousin, once my closest ally in this gilded world. He didn't smile, didn't make a joke to cut the tension like he usually would. He just leaned in and whispered, voice tight, "You need to be careful, Lauren. It's bigger than you think." I stopped, turned, but Evan had already slipped back into the crowd, swallowed up by shimmering dresses and black tie applause. I stood there a moment longer, alone in the space where my history used to be. The message was clear. I hadn't just been sidelined. I had been erased, and somewhere behind the velvet curtains and careful smiles, someone was making sure I stayed that way. The balcony doors yawned open, spilling a thin ribbon of cold night air into the glittering ballroom. I stepped through, needing distance, needing silence. The stone terrace wrapped around the building, bathed in soft light from artfully hidden sconces. Beyond the glass, the gala pressed on. A slow waltz of champagne flutes, careful smiles, and the hollow pageantry of loyalty. I wasn't alone. Tucked behind a column, two voices murmured. Low, sharp, urgent. I froze, hidden by the shadows, breath caught in my throat. "She's not the real problem," said a woman's voice. Ms. Green, one of the board members. "It's the mayor. He's too tied to her projects. If Richard doesn't move fast, the whole thing could blow up." "He knows," answered Mr. Wallace, sounding grim. "That's why he's pushing Cole front and center. Clean image, clean start. The grant." "Depends on it." "Grant? What grant?" I strained to hear, heart hammering against my ribs. If the mayor finds out about the zoning deal tied to the new community center, it won't just sink the foundation. It'll take half the council with it. Green exhaled sharply. That's why Richard had to cut her loose. She was never going to play the game right. They shifted, moving back toward the ballroom. I pressed flat against the stone until their footsteps faded into the noise. Slowly, I backed away from the column, the words chasing me into the dark. This wasn't about a personal slight. This wasn't about family pride. This was about something bigger, something tangled in politics, money, and power. And somehow, without even knowing it, I had become a liability. The air felt heavier now, thick with things unsaid. Every champagne glass, every handshaking politician inside that ballroom, they weren't just celebrating, they were circling. And somewhere inside, my father was orchestrating it all, smiling for the cameras while he quietly closed the next. Morning, the sunlight felt too bright, too sharp, slicing through the blinds like accusation. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, papers and memories scattered around me, trying to piece together a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was part of. The zoning deal. The grant. The foundation's sudden rebranding under Cole's leadership. I tore into the foundation's public records first, then the local government archives. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening certainty. The new community center project Richard had championed, the one Cole was being paraded as the face of, wasn't just philanthropy. It was a leveraged deal, tied to private developers, shady rezoning approvals, and a stream of money that flowed neatly back to Richard's old political allies. If exposed, it would stain not just the foundation, but the mayor himself. And several city council members. They needed a fresh figurehead, someone untarnished. Someone willing to smile and sign whatever papers they slid in front of him. Cole, not me. Buried deeper in the foundation's shared files, ones my clearance should have locked me out of but didn't, I found it. A confidential memo. Subject. Line. Mitigation strategy, L. Whitaker. The document was clinical, cold. List her emotional volatility as a concern. Highlight past disagreements with board decisions. Suggest a narrative of growing tensions and personal struggles. A roadmap to discredit me if I ever spoke out. There were even talking points drafted in case the press caught wind. We support Lauren through her difficult time. She's stepping back voluntarily to focus on personal matters. The foundation wishes her nothing but the best, polished lies, pre-approved pity. A campaign to erase me with kindness, the cleanest way to kill a legacy. I stared at the screen, numb, as my father's signature stared back at me from the bottom of the memo. He hadn't just let this happen, he had orchestrated it. My throat burned, but no tears came. Only one clear, steady thought. If they could erase me so easily, they could erase everything I built, and I wasn't going to let them. I didn't storm into the board meeting. I didn't demand answers. I didn't even call my father. I did what he never expected me to do. I waited, I watched, and I planned. There's a certain discipline that comes after betrayal, a kind of cold. Clarity that burns away every last impulse to scream or plead or crash the gates. Spent the next 48 hours quietly gathering everything I could, archived emails, financial filings, internal memos from the Foundation's secure drives, press releases drafted but never sent, all lined up neatly on my private server. Knew if I acted too soon, I'd be painted as the unstable daughter lashing out. If I acted too late, the deal would be done, and every door would close forever. Timing was everything. I crafted an anonymous packet, meticulously organized, unemotional, and sent it to one place Richard couldn't control. The mayor's office, specifically to Elena Cruz, the mayor's chief of staff, a woman known for her ruthless pragmatism and her thin tolerance for scandal. Along with it, I sent copies to 3 key donors whose reputations would crumble if tied to Richard's. Shady zoning scheme. No signature, no fingerprints, just truth, laid bare and waiting. There was risk, of course. If anyone traced it back to me before the gala, I would lose what little credibility I had left. And if they didn't act in time, the Foundation's public handoff to Cole would solidify Richard's new dynasty beyond reach. But sometimes, you don't get to pick a safe fight. Sometimes you have to step into the fire, not because you think you'll win, but because walking away would be the louder defeat. The clock was ticking. The gala was less than 72 hours away. Richard thought he had buried me quietly under the marble floors of his empire. He didn't know he had only pressed me deeper into the bedrock, the place where real foundations are built. The night of the gala, the Whitaker Foundation gleamed like a cathedral. The chandeliers burned brighter than ever. The champagne was colder. The smiles, wider, tighter, sharper. On the stage, Richard stood before the crowd, one hand resting proudly on Cole's shoulder. He spoke about legacy, about honor, about the future. He didn't mention me, not once. Cole accepted his plaque, a heavy silver tribute engraved with his name and the words, "Next Generation Leadership." He smiled for the cameras, shook hands, waved, but I saw it. For a brief moment, as the crowd clapped and the flashes popped, Cole's fingers trembled against the award's edge. He wasn't as certain as he looked, neither were they. I caught the first signs from the donors section. A glance exchanged, a whisper passed too quickly, a woman in pearls tapping furiously on her phone beneath the tablecloth. The air shifted, not enough to disrupt the choreography, but enough to sour the sweetness. By the time Richard called for a standing ovation, only half the room rose to their feet. The others hesitated. At my table, Judge Eleanor Monroe remained seated, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes cold and unblinking. Across the hall, Mr. Wallace dropped his gala program upside down, a small but deliberate crack in the facade. The leaks had started to spread, whispers on social media, anonymous emails forwarded to reporters, rumors about the zoning deal and the Foundation's real motives. They didn't have names yet. They didn't have proof. But suspicion was oxygen in a room full of open flames. Richard smiled. Through it all, wide and blinding, as if he could still control the story through sheer force of will. But cracks once opened only spread. And somewhere beneath the golden glow of chandeliers and applause, the empire he built began to tremble. The program was supposed to end with Cole's coronation. Richard had built it that way. A perfect, controlled story arc. Introduce the heir, celebrate the future, erase the past. The crowd was already shifting, preparing to toast the new chapter. When the mayor stepped to the podium, Mayor Thomas Ellery adjusted the microphone slowly, deliberately. The chatter stilled. The music faded to a polite hush, and then with a voice that carried clear across the grand ballroom, he said, "Before we conclude tonight, there's one more honor to bestow." The pause was deliberate, calculated. I watched Richard stiffen, his jaw tightening beneath the practiced smile. "Tonight," the mayor continued, "we recognize an individual whose vision, whose integrity, and whose tireless work have built the very foundation we stand upon." A ripple went through the crowd. Confusion, curiosity. I felt my heart kick once, hard. Please join me in honoring our city's pride, Ms. Lauren Whitaker. There was a heartbeat of stunned silence, a perfect suspended moment, before the room exploded. Gasps, a few awkward claps, a low murmur rising into something louder, harder to ignore. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. The spotlight swung across the ballroom, searching, until it landed squarely on me. I stood, slowly, feeling every eye in the room turn toward me, some wide with surprise, others narrowed in sudden calculation. Across the ballroom, Richard's face was carved in stone. Cole stared at the floor, the plaque still clutched tightly in his hand. I walked forward, every step deliberate, every muscle trembling with control. At the edge of the stage, Judge Monroe rose quietly from her seat, stepping beside me, her hand steadying my back just once before letting go. I climbed the stairs without looking back. The mayor extended his hand. His grip was firm, unwavering. "You built this city's hope, Lauren," he said, low enough for only me to hear. They just wrote their names on it. The applause grew, not thunderous, not overwhelming, but real. Real enough. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply stood beneath the lights, the daughter they thought they had erased, and let the truth, quiet and immovable, speak for itself. I didn't need to say anything. The mayor did it for me, with the kind of precision only someone with everything to lose could deliver. He turned to the audience and began, not with praise, but with numbers projected behind us, on the massive screen usually reserved for donor montages, came slides that cut through the room like scalpels. Number of community grants initiated under my leadership. 47. Number of scholarships disbursed from programs I personally designed. 312. Number of public records showing I had been stripped from authorship in the past 6 months. 19. Gasps. Whispers. The sound of silverware forgotten on fine china. Then came the next slide. Internal memos, leaked emails, a document titled Mitigation Strategy, L. Whitaker, displayed in full, with Richard's signature crisp and undeniable at the bottom. If questioned, suggest emotional instability. Position as voluntary departure. Encourage narrative of personal fatigue and transition. Someone in the audience, I couldn't see who, exhaled sharply, as if punched in the stomach. Across the room, Richard remained still, eyes locked. On the screen, as if by refusing to blink, he could erase what was already written. The mayor's voice never rose. It didn't need to. "Our city thrives not on manipulation," he said quietly, "but on truth. And the truth is that Ms. Whitaker's contributions were not just significant, they were foundational." The applause came slower this time, less performative. Some people clapped out of guilt. Some clapped because it was safe again. But others, the ones who mattered, clapped because the lie had cracked open and the truth had finally found oxygen. Richard didn't speak. He didn't stand. Cole remained seated beside him, the plaque now resting awkwardly on his lap, like something he no longer wanted to hold. I didn't gloat. I didn't turn to face them. The mayor placed the folder of evidence on the podium, closed it, and stepped aside. That sound, the soft click of a folder shutting, echoed louder than any accusation. I took a breath. Not the breath of someone triumphant, the breath of someone free. When the lights dimmed, I didn't stay for the final toast. I walked out before dessert, before the speeches wrapped, before anyone could pull me aside and say they had no idea. No one stopped me. Not Richard, not Cole, not the board. I passed. The gallery on my way out. The same display where my face had once been cropped from the photo. Tonight, that same image had been restored. 2 figures again. Me and him. I paused, then reached up, and with quiet fingers, turned the frame face down, on the velvet pedestal, not out of spite, not out of anger, simply to mark it finished. I kept walking. Past the gilded staircase, past the cameras still lingering outside, past the doorman who gave me a small nod, the kind you give to someone who just did something hard and did it well. Behind me, the ballroom carried on. The music resumed. The murmurs shifted. Let them rewrite whatever they needed to feel comfortable again. I wasn't part of the revision anymore. Out on the steps, the night air hit my skin like truth. Cold, honest, unfiltered. For the first time in months, I wasn't holding anything back. Not grief, not anger, not hope, just breath. I exhaled once, steady and full, then walked into the dark, not away from anything, but toward something finally mine.